Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today is a solo episode. I usually do a recap episode every year, and the podcast came out in 2022, the end of 2022. I also want to share that this year, Freelance Writing Direct won an award from the American Writing Awards. It was named Podcast of the Year in the education category. And I'm so grateful for the judges and for everybody who made that selection. Thank you. So we're now going into 2026, and I'm going to have 200 episodes this year, which I'm really excited about. I think about 6 months after the podcast started, I started a YouTube channel, so most of the episodes are up there once I started taping video as well as audio. And so let's talk about the year, and let's talk about what's going on, what's looking ahead in terms of publishing, in terms of what I'm doing and my teaching and my writing and my students' work. So this was a very exciting year. There was a lot of propelling movement, a lot of momentum, I would say, which I want to continue into 2026. In January, I continued doing my Zoom semi-private workshops that I do with about 8 students, and they've gotten tremendous success. Students have been published in Brevity and Business Insider and the Boston Globe. This year, my student Leslie Blankard and I did an episode with her, got into modern love, negotiating the end of us, with a piece that she started working on in my NYU class, which I'm also teaching this spring, writing your life in memoir, essays, and articles. And she continued to work on it with me and got accepted. And it's a beautiful piece. And I'll give a link, and everyone can also see the episode that I did. So let's continue on. So January, I was also excited that a subscription service, Write created a subscription box featuring Writing That Gets Noticed, which was such a fun surprise. Moments like that remind me that books continue to find new homes even after we've sent them out into the world. And February was a lot of family stuff. We traveled to Vail because my daughter and husband love to ski, and we pretty much do that every year. I continued teaching at NYU, and that was when I found out that I was selected as a TEDx speaker. And that was very meaningful for me. My TEDx talk that ended up coming out, I think it came out in May, but I did it at the end of March, is called How to Get Noticed in Your Writing and Beyond. It's a talk that I'm so proud of and love doing it. And there's going to be more this year about doing TEDx talks and writing them in particular, that I'm going to be doing more teaching on. So that happened in February, and I also got my colors analyzed with my daughter, and that was so much fun. And I found out that I'm a cool summer, which I never thought. I always thought I was a winter because growing up, I had dark hair until I guess when I started lightening it after I had my daughter. And so it was interesting to find that out. And my daughter, I think, is a deep winter. So that's fun. I recommend it's a fun mother-daughter thing to do. And we also saw together Maybe Happy Ending. And that was brilliant. It's really entertaining. March was a tough month for me in a lot of ways. My beloved dad, Jerome Sobel, died of conditions caused by Alzheimer's. He was very much, so much less of who he once was by the time he died because Alzheimer's is such a devastating disease. It strips people of their personalities and their whole essence. But he still had that smile and he still had that protective, kind look in his eyes. Even if he didn't know who to protect or what to do, he was still my dad, even though we couldn't really have conversations and he just couldn't even remember what he had for lunch. And in a way, I'd had anticipatory grief for a long time. So when he died on March 8th, my mom called me and I was coming back from teaching at NYU from this in the city and I learned about it. And so we had the funeral a few days later and my dad is laid to rest and I miss the dad that he was. He was such a great dad and I'm so lucky that I had him in my life. In April, I also presented a webinar for Writer's Digest, and I love creating new ways to teach craft. It was really very fulfilling to teach about memoir and structure and all the things that I taught in the webinars, especially as I work on my own memoir this year. So May, I continued teaching. I spoke at the Open Secrets Live panel on relationships. June, I tried to relax, but I wasn't able to relax that much because we went to see my in-laws who retired they were living in Australia and they moved to Fiji. And so, yes, I went to Fiji with my family and we were in Sabu Sabu, we were in Nadi. It's the most beautiful country I think I've ever seen. It's just stunning. And my husband and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and we got to go to the Namali Resort, which is Tony Robbins' resort. And it's truly beautiful. And just spending those few days outside of family, because we had a lot of family all staying together with my in-laws. My husband's South African. So we had relatives from South Africa, we had relatives coming from Australia. It was just a lot of fun, but it was a lot of family and a lot of excitement. So just those few days for me and my husband was just such a respite. And then July, we saw some concerts. We saw Toto, which has a lot of significance for me and my husband because they play the song Africa. And of course, he's from South Africa. And Men at Work. And they had a whole bunch of people at the PNC Art Center. And it was just so fun. And, I think work is important, but without play, you're just on a grind. I don't really work on the weekends. I mean, I have my moments when I do, but I try not to work on the weekends. That's family time. Of course, when I'm traveling, I don't work if I can help it. And so that's kind of how I like to structure what I'm doing so that I have a balance, because otherwise it can just become too overwhelming. And I don't recommend that. If you're able to make sure you have boundaries that way. August, I taught at NYU. I teach every year the high school academy program where rising juniors and seniors in high school come from all over the world to study with me, and they study journalism. I have them write op-eds. I have them write micro-memoir. I have them write articles, feature articles, essays. They learn all about interviewing. And it's just a great, like 1 week, very saturated week of learning, but it's really fun. And I often have editors speak to the class. Noah Michelson from HuffPost Personal came and spoke to the class. I've had editors speak from The Cut. I've had many different editors, including editors who've done my NYU events, my editor and call events, which I've had editors from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Shondaland, which is now defunct as far as essays go. November, I published my craft essay in Open Secrets magazine titled Making Concessions When Writing Confessions. And it's really, I reference some of my earlier experiences when people wrote for The Mix, which is now defunct, but how people can take advantage of writers' experiences and mine them for clicks that kind of hurt the writer. So I talked a bit about that and how I've tried to protect writers. And I address it in Writing That Gets Noticed because it's so important to me to be a literary fairy godmother to the writers I work with and protect them, as well as help them develop their craft and their voice and help them get their stories out into the world. In the fall, I think it was November, I also did the webinar, Mapping Your Memoir for Writer's Digest, and we talked about all the different kinds of structures. And in December, I published a piece that's really important to me because it's one of my most vulnerable, and it's in Provoked magazine, and it's called When Your Colleague Is Not a Friend, She's Your Frenemy. And I framed it around an experience that I had where someone basically said to me while I was telling a story from my magazine editor days in New York to people that, it's just Estelle's world and we're living in it. And that is the basis for my essay. And when I see something or hear something or something affects me, I write it down right away. And then one day I write about it when I'm ready to write about it. Actually, I haven't written much about my dad's death, but I did take a lot of notes around that time, and something is percolating, but it's not yet ready. But it will be eventually, because that's what we do as writers, right? We mine our experiences, we make sure that we hone them, we make sure we tell the stories in the ways that's going to make it the most effective. And what's coming ahead? Well, my Substack this year has really blossomed, and I'm thrilled with all the new subscribers and the people who have joined me there. I have opportunities for my paid subscribers to get edited by me, to have some of their work reviewed by me, to come up with titles, all different fun things that I can think of. And sometimes they're connected to webinars that I'm teaching. And one of the upcoming webinars that I'm really excited to be teaching is going to be in February. It'll be February 26th from 1 to 2:30 with Writer's Digest. And it's called Amplifying the Echo Effect in Memoir and Essays. And this will help you understand how patterns, callbacks, and emotional echoes can deepen your work. So as always, it'll be an interactive webinar, and I'm really excited to do this one, and I hope you sign up for it, and I see you there. And I will also connect it to an opportunity after on my Substack for paid subscribers who attend the webinar. This year is going to be about my memoir that I'm working on, that I now have structure, that I now have ideas, and I'm working on a proposal for it as well. So I guess I'm making myself accountable to you because this is coming out in the beginning of the year, and I'm hoping to sell my memoir sometime early next year, ideally. If it gets sold later than that, that's okay too. But I want to give myself a little bit of accountability and a little bit of grace. And I've been working on this for a long time, but it's almost harder when you are somebody who has written a lot because you're just trying to decide what needs to go in and what needs to stay out. And because I have so much material written, not that it's been published, but because I have so much written, that for me was more of a challenge than actually starting from scratch, which some recommendations were to start from scratch, but I really didn't do that. And I think it's better for it. So that's what's going on. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit more about what's going on in the industry. In terms of Substack, it's becoming saturated. But again, if you have a great platform and if you have a way to share your work, I think that could be very useful. It just has to be really helpful to the people that are subscribing, or even if they're free subscribers, because they have so many options. For what I've noticed a trend in Substack is people like Hannah Sward writing her stories, almost like in a novelized, fictionalized way, but they're stories from her life. But they're so engaging that you really are compelled to keep reading, and probably they'll end up being a book. And also Rona Maynard, who's been a guest on the program, and she writes really compelling stories. They always say, write memoir like a novel, and I think that's really important. And I'm probably going to start sharing a little bit more about my magazine editor days in my Substack here and there. I think publishing is really getting smaller. So some of these Substack opportunities to publish in, they're getting huge readership. I was in another James Pratt thing with a story I wrote about revenge. It was for her paid subscribers, but it still gets a lot of eyeballs on it because some of the traditional outlets have closed. It's harder and harder to get into the New York Times, and it's very hard to get into Modern Love, of course. But to get an essay in the Times, they used to have ties. They used to have, other different sections, private lives. They don't have that anymore. And so Provoked magazine, I really highly recommend writing for them. So there are other places that I'm looking to publish in and will be publishing in this year. But I do think that the markets for personal essays is a little bit smaller than it used to be, which is why I help the writers that I work with directly in my small groups to curate places where they can publish. And I think that's important. In terms of I have been a big advocate from the beginning. You have to learn how to use it. Why? Because if you want to ever get a job in a company, they're using AI. Publishers are using AI. Listicles are becoming a thing of the past for writers, which is not a bad thing because they're using AI. They're using AI for content development and content marketing. I recommend AI for brainstorming. It could be good for titles, although I'm better with titles than AI, but it could be good for a lot of different things. You just have to use your judgment. You can say, I want to do a slide presentation, and these are the ideas that I want to put in, and then it'll organize your slides. I do think that you need to know how to work with AI. It's not going away. It's like the typewriter. It's like the internet, that there were so many naysayers when that happened. You have to use it as a tool, and it's all about judgment. AI can tell you to put something in a presentation that doesn't make sense, that isn't correct, that isn't vetted. And so you have to really be careful when you're using it. But you should start looking at ways you can use it at the very least in terms of brainstorming. Other things looking ahead, I'm going to be moderating a panel at AWP on writing for literary as well as consumer publications. And I'm very excited about that one. And I'm excited to see what you think I should be focusing on in terms of the podcast episodes and what you want to hear from me more about. And I wish everyone a safe, healthy holiday season and start to 2026. And I love talking to you through the podcast and sharing what's going on in my life and in publishing and with my students. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye-bye. Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.